Vice President Joe Biden is heading back to Capitol Hill today in an effort to sell Senate Democrats on the nuclear deal with Iran. Yesterday, he spent the morning trying to persuade Democrats in the House to back the agreement. The White House has received a lot of criticism for the deal from those at home and abroad. Secretary of State John Kerry is hosting the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, whose nation also has major concerns about the deal. All of this comes as President Obama spent more than an hour answering questions from the media Wednesday. Major Garrett was there.
Either the issue of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon is resolved diplomatically, through a negotiation, or it's resolved through force, through war.
Iran is already close to a nuclear weapon, 2 to 3 months away, according to U.S. experts, but will be at least a year away for the next decade if this deal is implemented.
Even if everything the critics were saying was true, they won't be at a breakout point that is more dangerous than the breakout point they're in right now.
Don't let them have their yellow cake and eat it too.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu attacked the 24-day waiting period international weapons inspectors must endure before gaining access to suspected covert nuclear sites inside Iran. The president said the risk is minimal.
This is not something you hide in a closet. This is not something you put on a dolly and kind of wheel off somewhere.
Mr. Obama bristled when pressed on the fate of 4 Americans still held captive by the Iranian regime. Can you tell the country, sir, why you are content with all the fanfare around this deal to leave the conscience of this nation and the strength of this nation unaccounted for in relation to these 4 Americans?
The notion that I'm content as I celebrate with American citizens languishing in Iranian jails? Major, that's nonsense, and you should know better. Now, if the question is why we did not tie the negotiations to their release, think about the logic that creates. Suddenly, Iran realizes, you know what, maybe we can get additional concessions out of the Americans by holding these individuals.
CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett joins us now from the White House briefing room. Major, it seems like critics have a lot to say about the deal, but is anyone actually putting forth another solution?
Well, in general, the only other alternative offered by critics of this deal when it was in the negotiating stage and now that it's finally been put on paper is this: more sanctions against Iran. And they argue that if there had been more economic sanctions, tougher sanctions on Iran, Iran would have been compelled to offer up more concessions and possibly give up all of its nuclear materials, all of its underlying nuclear technology, and there'd be never a chance of that country ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. That's sort of the world the critics imagine. The president does have an answer for that, saying, first of all, the United States negotiating partners would never apply the pressure required to force Iran to give up all of its nuclear technology. And there is an agreement globally under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that nations can have a civilian nuclear program for energy. And denying a sovereign nation that right is not something the international community would recognize. So the president answers Iran was going to have a nuclear program, and that was a reality. The key is, from his perspective, is to make sure whatever that nuclear program is, whatever its pursuit of a nuclear weapon might be, it is fenced off. And the president argues this agreement does far more to do that than the current situation and more than the critics have so far offered as a credible alternative.
Major, I have to ask you about that news conference yesterday. You provoked quite a reaction from the president when you suggested he was content with the 4 hostages still in Iran. Everyone is talking about this. Did you intentionally provoke him?
I provoked the president to reconcile what I believe are 2 issues that any president under this circumstance should have to address. The president made clear in that press conference before and after our encounter that he had to prioritize a lot of different issues in reaching this agreement with Iran. Among them, just to name one, the fact that Iran would have hundreds of billions of dollars that it might, as the president said openly, use to fund terrorist operations in the broader Middle East. He said that's a problem. But is it more important than obtaining a nuclear deal? No. So the president made clear publicly that lots of concessions, priorities, and choices had to be made. All I was trying to do was to elicit from the commander-in-chief where these 4 Americans in Iran fell in his prioritization. of obtaining a nuclear deal and whether he fought for their release. This is a sensitive subject for the president. I did not mean to suggest, and I would tell those who believe I did, they are wrong, that he was content with their captivity. But he had to be content with the idea they would not be released in the context of this Iran nuclear deal. I was just trying to find out why.
So, Major, what do you make of the president's demeanor lately? I feel like we've talked about this a lot. Does he seem more comfortable?
Well, look, that's for a lot of people who are much more adept at analyzing the behavior patterns of presidents and how they evolve over a presidency than I am. I'm merely a reporter who covers this building on a daily basis. I have covered 2 previous presidents, and I have observed in my time as a White House correspondent that over time presidents become more comfortable with the powers they wield and how to wield them in a way that gives them a greater sense of satisfaction and projection, if you will. I think that's an evolutionary process for everyone who holds this office. It is particularly true in the second term of a re-elected president because you're more accustomed to everything that you have at your disposal and how to talk about it and how to use it. I think the president is moving along that evolutionary scale. As to his demeanor, I'll leave that to others to evaluate.
All right, Major Garrett in the White House briefing room for us. Thanks so much.